There are certain things in Super Mario Maker which I never quite understood. For example, why does this pipe spawn items even though we're at the enemy limit, while this pipe refuses to spawn items even though we are nowhere near the limit? So I finally figured out what's going on here. The normal entity limit of the creation mode plays no role as soon as the play button is pressed. Instead, there is a different entity limit when playing, the entity limit B. Understanding how this works opens up insane new possibilities for Mario Maker stages, because this limit can actually be manipulated in our favor to make stuff possible that was previously thought impossible. In this video, we're going to go over how everything works step by step, and in the end we will be able to create global timers to have a pipe that only spawns an item when a Goomba on the other side of the map was defeated, manipulate Magikoopa randomness so that they're only able to spawn coins, take a look at a bullet blaster that only shoots when a blue platform fell down, and much more. So, are you ready for a tiny Super Mario Maker revolution? Let's do this! Okay, so first let's talk about the standard entity limit. Normally, we're only able to place up to 100 enemies on a screen. The enemies that count towards the normal enemy limit, or the enemy limit A, are the enemies that are grayed out if there are 100 placed in the creation mode. While we aren't able to place any more Goombas here, for example, since there are already 100, we're still allowed to copy question blocks containing Goombas, since question blocks containing Goombas do not count towards the entity limit A, the normal limit. If Mario now tries to release one of the Goombas stored in a question block, the Goomba isn't allowed to spawn since the enemy limit is reached. So far, it makes sense. Where things become interesting is if we walk away from the Goombas and try to hit a question block containing a Goomba, because this question block then suddenly releases its Goomba. This is because the 100 Goombas become unloaded once we are 30 blocks away from them, and only reload once we come close to them again. So this doesn't look like much at first glance, but the consequences of this are huge, because this confirms that there is a second completely different entity limit when the game is played, and this limit changes during the runtime and can be filled, cleared and manipulated to do some insane things. The entity limit B. Since I'm going to refer to the different limits a lot over this video, the entity limit A, or the ELA, is the standard limit in the creation mode, with which most of us are probably more than familiar, and the entity limit B, or ELB, is the limit that is calculated during the playtime and can be manipulated. Okay, so if we take a look back at the Goombas from before and draw in the current items stored in the ELB, then we can see that at some point all 100 Goombas are unloaded, and from then on we're able to spawn Goombas again. One interesting thing with the ELB can be seen here too. It can be overloaded. Even though there were already a couple of Goombas loaded, the game loads all the 100 Goombas in and overloads the entity limit B over 100 now. If we wanted to get a Goomba to spawn out of a question block again, we would have to get rid of as many Goombas as required to drop back below 100 again. We're going to have a lot of fun with this in a moment. But first, let's take a look at our first ELB manipulation trickery. Track memory. We already talked a little bit about this in a previous video, but as it turns out, it's actually cooler than I previously thought. Items on tracks stay loaded, no matter where Mario is in the stage. As long as the room isn't reloaded, all previously loaded items on tracks stay loaded. This allows us to fill the entity limit B whenever we want and allows us to easily keep it at a certain amount for the whole stage. Here we use this to load in 100 Goombas again, which fills the normal entity limit A, but also completely fills the limit B. This way of loading Goombas in has an enormous benefit over the previous one. The Goombas never despawn, and because of this, all Goomba question blocks in this level are blocked from spawning, no matter where Mario is. But it gets even cooler, because if we defeat one of the Goombas, we're suddenly able to trigger a question block on the other side of the map that previously wouldn't have spawned, since now there is one free spot in the ELB. But track memory actually allows us to do something else. It allows us to have globally working contraptions and to keep entities that would normally despawn to stay loaded. So Check this out. This is a 5-second track timer that activates a P-switch once triggered. The problem is this timer only works while it is on screen. As soon as Mario runs away, the Muncher becomes unloaded. The P-switch on tracks is actually stored in the track memory and therefore stays active, but the Muncher despawns, and when we are away, there is nothing to trigger the P-switch. In theory, we could try to put the Muncher on tracks as well, then both parts of the contraption stay loaded. Sadly, this doesn't help, because two items on tracks can't interact with each other. But luckily, there is still a way to build a global timer, because items that aren't on tracks are able to enter track memory if they're on top of an item that moves on tracks. Or to put it simpler, moving items on tracks never despawn. This simple setup does the trick, and suddenly we have a global timer that starts to count once loaded and can only be stopped by reloading the room. This alone has insane potential. It allows us, for example, to build an escape sequence after a boss fight where Mario has exactly 30 seconds to finish the stage before everything collapses, or to build speedrun challenges that can be split into many smaller short speedrun sections, or probably to trigger a POW block exactly every 10 seconds and much more. We will revisit this because there is definitely a ton of stuff possible, but let's go back to the entity limit B, because we only have scratched the surface of what's possible so far. Okay, so far we talked about what the ELB actually is and how to load items into it globally. Next, let's take a look on what options we have to test whether the ELB is actually filled. When the ELB is at or over 100 items, a couple of interesting things happen. This stage is set up in a way that we are always at 100 or more enemies loaded in the ELB. So the first, funniest and most useless thing that happens, Magikoopa bullets will always spawn a coin when they transform a block. In theory, that's a way to test whether the entity limit is full, though finding a contraption that uses this might be a little bit challenging. The next thing that changes is the thing we used so far to visualize the ELB. It's that question blocks are no longer able to release their content. This can easily be turned into an actually useful signal, and this is really useful when building a stage that uses these shenanigans, because it allows us to quickly test whether the ELB is currently filled. Next, Lakitus stop to throw what they're currently holding. Interestingly, a single Lakitu always counts as two entities towards the ELB. Bullet blasters stop to spit out items if the ELB is full. This is extremely useful and the reason why the first don't kill the enemies contraption in the previous video worked. Pipes stop to spawn items once the ELB is full, but pipes are a special case because items in pipes count toward the standard entity limit of the creation mode, but they do not count towards the ELB. Only the items they spawn count. This means that if there are 100 items in the ELA and pipes which spawn some items, these pipes will spawn exactly one copy of whatever they hold. We can still prevent pipes from ever spawning by overflowing the ELB. More on this in a second. Finally, note blocks and invisible question blocks behave the same way as normal question blocks do. If the ELB is filled, they do not spawn their content. Okay, so that were all the ways I found to test whether the ELB is filled, but it's absolutely possible that I missed something. So next, let's quickly talk about the differences between the ELB and the ELA, because this is where things start to become really interesting. So first, if an enemy is defeated, it does no longer count towards the ELB. We've seen this so far. The cool thing is, this is not only true for enemies. If a P-switch is triggered, it opens up an ELB spot too. So do thrown POW blocks, dropped skeleton roller coasters, or lost springs. But most interesting of all, this is also true for blue platforms. If a blue platform falls down, it opens up its ELB spot, which is really interesting. But what's even more interesting is that there are a couple of items which exclusively count towards the ELB. Doors, for example. Every loaded door takes a spot in the ELB. This allows us to overflow the ELB with ease. If we have 100 normal ELA items loaded, for example, and there are 2 doors, then the ELB count is at 102, which means we need to defeat 3 enemies before we are able to spawn a new entity. And finally, cannonballs which cannons shoot count towards the ELB. Check this out. Here Mario finds himself in a small troll contraption. As soon as he enters this small corridor, he has no choice but to trigger the question block if he ever wants to reach the exit pipe. Sadly, triggering this question block is no option either, because this transforms the floor into shiny yet deadly coins and drops him into his doom. Luckily, there are some cannons to Mario's left, and even more lucky for Mario, he's been watching this video. Because of this, he knows that cannonballs fill the ELB. This means that all that Mario needs to do here is to wait for exactly 100 cannonballs to spawn, and then he needs to escort them towards the contraption before they become unloaded. Because if he does exactly this, the question block can't release its content, since the ELB is at over 100 and Mario is able to enter the saving exit pipe. Hooray! By the way, what's also obvious here is that cannons stop to shoot once the ELB is filled. This is why the second time not all cannons fire. And as another side note, as far as my testing goes so far, cannons themselves do not count towards the ELB, only the balls they fire. Which would make sense because otherwise cannons could really fast pew pew block themselves, but I need to do more testing on this. Okay, there is one more entity that does count towards the ELB, while not counting towards the ELA. And this one is the most useful of them all. It's the falling donut block. A donut block starts to count towards the ELB as soon as something threatens to make it fall, and if it actually falls down, it only stops to count once it respawned. That's huge, for a very simple reason. This allows us to donut overflow the ELB whenever we feel like it. So here's the thing. Forms on top of donut blocks immediately start to drop the donut blocks down once loaded. Because of this, these donut blocks start to overflow the ELB and allow us to control the ELB count at every point of the stage. Here, for example, we load 93 munchers into the track memory at the beginning of the stage. Then we have a quick section where Mario has to fight against 2 Goombas. Or he doesn't fight and he skips them, it doesn't matter since they leave the ELB as soon as they are unloaded anyway. Then we have a small boss fight against the winged Monty Mole, which rides on top of a winged Monty Mole. Mario has to defeat exactly both winged moles here if he wants to proceed, because only if exactly both are defeated, the ELB becomes freed and we are able to leave this area again. But why is the ELB overflowed here? Well, it's because of this awesome Thwomp at the bottom who constantly overflows the ELB by dropping 3 donut blocks down. Here is another, a little bit more sophisticated design, combining a lot of what we've learned so far. Keep an eye out for the ELB monitor in the upper right corner in order to keep track of how we manipulate the ELB count here. First, here we load 86 munchers onto track memory so that this part of the ELB is filled for the rest of the stage. Next, we have currently 3 Thwomps, which donut overload 4 blocks each, which means that we are donut overflowing our current ELB count by 15. Because of this, we are above 100 and the question blocks can't spawn their content. But these 15 donut overflowed entities are only temporary. As soon as we are 30 blocks away, these 15 spots disappear and there is room in the ELB again. Then we enter the next part of the stage. Here we have a blue platform and a bullet blaster, which both count towards the ELB, and we donut overflow it once again, here for 12 entities. This brings the ELB up to exactly 100. Because of this, the blaster can't shoot anymore. But if we platform up to the blue platform and drop it down, the platform spot in the ELB is freed, and because of this, the blaster is able to shoot again. This allows us to basically turn a blaster on by dropping a blue platform down. Then all the entities are freed from the ELB and there is a lot of open space again. Now we load a Goomba on tracks in. Since this Goomba is on tracks, he enters the track memory and isn't unloaded. Then there is a pipe which spawns P-switches. This pipe isn't able to spawn because there is a muncher and we do not overflow the ELB for 12 again. But how do we proceed here? Well, we need to free the ELB for 1. And the only way our poor plumber has to do this is by taking the hidden path at the top, because this path leads him to the Goomba from before. If Mario now defeats this Goomba, 1 spot in the ELB gets freed globally. If we now go back to where we just came from, the ELB count is now at 99. And suddenly the pipe is willing to spawn an item and we are able to proceed. That's the whole magic trick. Okay, so that's all I figured out about the second entity limit. What we discussed here are really only the basics, and I'm sure I missed half of the awesome things possible because of this. But in case you're worried that this doesn't allow us to build everything we ever wanted to build in Mario Maker, worry not. Because as it turns out, there is a third hidden entity limit in Super Mario Maker, the entity limit C, which calculates goodies like Yum Yum mushrooms and can be manipulated in completely different ways than the ELB. And most important, it can be combined to create much crazier stuff than we've seen so far. I'll do a video about this in the near future. I can't tell you how excited I am to toy around with all of this some more and to play some levels you wonderful ladies and gentlemen hopefully create that use these tricks. I seriously hope you enjoyed this little video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and maybe you feel especially curious whether subscribing to this channel will make it appear in your channel feed A, B or C, and want to hit the subscribe button as well. I hope that you have a wonderful day and to see you soon. Goodbye!